Knowing the interview process can go a long way in alleviating some interview jitters. As a disclaimer, there are many different types of interviews, and you may encounter some interviews that don't follow the exact pattern that I'll describe here, but for the most part, you can expect most of the characteristics that I'll mention in most interview settings. Before I go into the traditional interview layout discussion, let's go over some of the other types of interviews you may encounter along your job search journey. First, there are individual interviews, and this is where it's a one-to-one interview, usually with a hiring manager. There are also panel or group interviews, and this is probably the most common interview type, and you'll likely have representatives from different departments in on it to have the most well-rounded group of people interviewing you. Another type of group interview, which is not as common, would be where there's a panel of people interviewing several candidates at once. Then they choose the one that they want to keep for the second round of interviews. Next, there are phone interviews. Many search processes start out with a phone screening so that they can be as efficient as possible when filtering out the candidates that they want to bring to the in-person interview, whether it's an individual interview or a panel interview. Phone interviews can be challenging because you don't have the luxury of seeing the reactions of people that you're interviewing, and it can feel like you're talking to a wall. There's also video interviews. With technology taking over many aspects of our lives, it's also affecting the job search and the interviewing process. Many of the larger companies are now using video chat applications such as Skype or Google Hangout to conduct job interviews, because let's face it, it's expensive for the company and the candidate to interview if you have to fly across the country or drive long distances just to get to an interview. Why not take advantage of it? And the last type of interview that I'll mention in this video is the career fair interview. And these kinds of interviews happen on-site at job fairs. It can last anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes max. Usually these interviews are used to screen candidates in order to offer longer in-person interviews. These can be challenging because depending on how the fair is run, you could be answering questions in a noisy environment, so it's important to know what you want to talk about and be able to project your voice so that the recruiter can hear you, but obviously not to shout at them. Now that we've covered the basic types of interviews, let's talk about a traditional interview format. When do you think an interview starts? I would say that the interview starts at the second you enter the parking lot. As a good rule of thumb, it's important to treat everyone you meet the day of the interview as part of your interviewing committee. Make sure to smile and be friendly and courteous, because you never know who will have an impact on the hiring decision. I've heard of cases where people have dropped off applications at an employer's office with the administrative assistant, and they were quite rude to the assistant, so the assistant promptly dumped their application materials into the trash. I'm not sure how much it happens now with online applications, but it's an example of how much influence certain people can have on the hiring process. It's a good idea to show up 5 to 10 minutes early for an interview, 15 minutes at the max. If you arrive too early, it may be a bit awkward for you and the interviewer, especially if you're not the only candidate that they're interviewing. Once you get to the interview, the first thing that happens will be your introductions and first impressions. It's important to have a solid handshake. This shows that you're a confident person. Now, it's also important to have a firm handshake, but you don't want to have a death grip. I would recommend practicing with your friends and family to nail down that perfect handshake. You'll also want to make eye contact with everyone that will be interviewing you. This establishes a connection with them and the fact that you're engaged in the conversation. It's also important to smile and show that you're friendly. They brought you in for a reason, and they do want to hire you. You just have to convince them that you're the right person for the job. If you can, try to get the names and business cards of the people that are interviewing you so that you can send thank you notes or emails after the interview. In the interview, you'll want to address the interviewers as Mr. or Ms. and their last name, unless you're told otherwise. Once the introductions have happened, it's a good time to warm up the conversation by having a bit of small talk, and you can initiate this. You can talk about safe topics such as the weather, positive things you notice on the way into the building, or even, what do you love about working here? Once you get to the body of the interview, it'll be question and answer time. If you can, try to make it more of a conversation than simply playing ping pong with the questions and answers. It'll make the situation a bit more low-key, and you'll probably be able to relax a little bit. It's also a good idea to bring in several copies of your resume, in case you have interviewers who have not seen your resume yet, or in case they need a copy of it. It also would not be a bad idea to bring a copy of your references as well. In the next video, I'll go over the SOLAR method of interviewing so that you can learn how to look your best while in an interview. As a brief intro to that though, SOLAR stands for sitting comfortably, open posture, lean forward, effective eye contact, and relax. During the interview, keep in mind that anything that you put on your resume is fair game, so make sure that you know your experiences well so that you can give strong answers. You'll also want to be ready to talk about what you will bring to the position in terms of your personality, skills, and experience, and why you're the best fit person for the position. The best way to bring life to your answers is to give concrete examples of the things that you're talking about. For example, if you say that you have strong problem-solving skills, provide a couple of examples of how you've solved these kinds of problems and what the end results are. It's also important to stay positive in answering questions. You may get a question such as, why did you leave your last job? You don't want to bash your previous employer. It will reflect poorly on you and will likely cost you the interview. It's okay to talk about problems that need to be solved, but make sure to end them on a happy note. Before getting to the interview, it's important to practice your answers, but you don't want to get to the point where you sound too much like a robot or have it rehearsed to the point where you're just rattling off answers. That being said, you also don't want to ramble. It's a very fine line to walk because many people are uncomfortable with silence, so they try to fill the air with unnecessary tangents or words such as and you know, things of that nature. It's also important to give more than one word or one sentence answers, just not a whole book. The more that you can prove that you have the experience and knowledge they are looking for, the better off you'll be. You may run into some points where you have no idea how you're going to answer a question. It happens to all of us, and I'm here to tell you that it's completely okay to ask for time to think about your answer. Obviously, you won't want to ask for a minute or two, but it's better to ask for that time to think instead of filling the silence with ums and you knows. This also gives you a chance to breathe and clear out your head so that you can organize your thoughts to give a decent answer. It's also important to be aware of your body language during an interview. You'll want to keep fidgeting to a minimum, such as tapping your toes or perhaps wringing your hands and using your hands effectively. You can absolutely use your hands to emphasize points, but you also don't want to have them out of control to the point where they're taking out the person next to you. Practice makes perfect in those areas. When the interview is getting ready to wrap up, it's important to bring out your final points, such as what do you want them to remember about you? It's also important to continue to show your enthusiasm for the position in that you'll want to reiterate your interest in the position and why you're the person they should hire. A key piece in the interview is having questions for the employer ready. This shows that you've done your homework and that you genuinely want to make sure that this will be a good fit. It's important to ask questions that answers cannot be easily found on the company website or other research sites. Some examples of questions could be, what will my first month on the job look like? Or, what is the management style like in the office? Or, how will my job performance be evaluated? It's a good idea to have 3 to 5 questions ready, perhaps 5 in case a couple of them happen to be answered in the interview, which is fine. It's also a good time to talk about next steps. You can ask them what to expect in the coming days or weeks leading up to the hiring decision, and if there's anything that you need to do in the meantime. Once the interview is done, you'll want to thank the interviewers for their time and leave promptly. This is important because you don't want to make things awkward, and especially if they have another candidate coming in right after you, that could definitely make things very awkward. Once you leave the interview, it's a great time to reflect. What went well during the interview? What would you do differently for next time? Another important piece is the follow-up. I would highly recommend sending a thank you note or email 24 to 48 hours after the interview. The sooner the better. Also, if you have the time, sending a handwritten note goes a long way in impressing the interviewer. It takes time and energy to write one, and it has more of a personal touch. If you don't have the time to do it, an email is okay. but if you have the resources, I'd send the handwritten one. If you don't know what to include in the note, you can thank them for their time during the interview, what you've learned during the interview, reiterate anything that you want them to remember about you, or if you've forgotten to mention anything that would help sell you for the position, you can also include that in the note as well.